If you're running a Shopify store and you're not happy with the number of emails or phone numbers you're getting, this is the exact pop-up design I've been using inside Klaviyo to drive up higher conversion rates. In this video, I'll be breaking down the most crucial elements you should be focusing on to increase your email signups dramatically. One of the first elements I want to go over, and honestly, a lot of Shopify owners miss this or they just don't focus on it as much as they should, is your offer. Now, I've seen brands do giveaways to grow their list, and honestly, you can do that too if you want to rack up subscribers really easily. The problem is you're going to be attracting a lot of freebie seekers, from my experience. These are people who are interested in the prize you're giving away and not necessarily interested in buying your product. These people just end up sitting on your list. They don't really buy from you, and ultimately it just costs you more in Klaviyo billing every month because these people are not turning into customers and generating revenue for you. So optimizing your pop-up isn't just about getting the most emails possible, it's about getting the right kind of emails. Now, in most cases, that's why I recommend you offer a discount, because a discount signals buyer intent, right? If somebody gives you their email address because you have giving them a discount, it's because they want to use that discount to buy something from you, right? And yeah, in general, generally speaking, most brands use 10-15%. That works great, but obviously the higher the better. Now, as a pro tip, if you're running a sale, let's say it's for 20% or 30%, you want to make sure your pop-up changes from 10-15% to 20-30%, because if your pop-up is saying 10-15% and you have a sale for 20%, people are not going to really sign up for that incentive. So you actually want to update that, and it does really work great for signups. You do get a big boost of people signing up, and at the thank you page, you could just let them know that it's auto apply to checkout. You don't have to create a discount code, obviously. Just as a reminder before we move on, the goal is not list growth for the sake of list growth. You don't want to necessarily just have the biggest list possible. You actually just want a list that converts and generates revenue for you. So I always say it's not a list of subscribers you want, it's a list of buyers you actually want. Very important distinction. Just want to make that clear before we move on. Now, other than choosing your offer, the next element you should really be focusing on that's really important based on my experience is how you actually present the offer as a first step in your pop-up. It's a lot like YouTube and thumbnails, where you want to get somebody to click the thumbnail, watch the video, and emails and subject lines where you want the subject line to hook them and open the email and read the rest. The first step really is about grabbing the attention and making sure you hook them, because if you can't get them on the first step of the pop-up, you're not going to be able to get them with the rest of the steps of your pop-up, right? The mistake I see a lot of brands making is they'll present the offer and then they'll also ask for the email address right away on the first step. That doesn't really work that great in this day and age, just because people are a little used to that. They've seen that on other websites, and they just got on your website and you're already asking for their email. So people just have an aversion to it, and in most cases they just click X and they don't even bother with the rest of your pop-up. If you think about it, asking someone for their email address the second they get on your website, like within seconds of them being there, is a bit of a big ask. You know, you're asking them to give that kind of information out. They actually have to type it out. In most cases, it's just too much work and people feel like you're already asking too much up front. So instead, what you actually want your first step to be is something that's a little simpler, less demanding, a little more disarming, if you will. That's actually why when you go on a website, you'll sometimes see these like spin the wheel type of pop-up, or maybe it says you got a discount and there's 3 hats and it's like you got to pick the right hat to get the discount. It doesn't matter what hat you pick, you always get the discount. But the whole point here is it's a game, right? Instead of asking you for your email address right away, it's getting you to click something. It's getting you to have a little fun. So really the word is disarming. It's not asking you for anything. It's just trying to play a little game with you, and it's also giving you an offer. The reason that works well, again, it's so different from what they're used to. People are used to being asked for their email address, but here you're making a little game. So they take steps forward, which actually ends up getting you the email address at the end of it. Another version, which I personally like to do, is you tell them what the discount is that they've got, and then you ask them. So for example, you say you've got 15%, and then you ask them what their number 1 goal is. Option A, option B, option C, and then they just have to click one, and then you take them to the next step. Again, it's very similar to the gamified pop-ups, where you're just asking for them to click something first. You're not asking for the email address, and that's really the point. You just want them to take that first step by keeping it super simple. And what this essentially does is it gets them to make a micro commitment, so that when you do finally ask for the email address in the second step, the follow-up step, they're much more likely to actually fill it out and give you that information, because they've already engaged with the first step, and in their heads, they've already accepted the idea that they actually want the discount. That's how that works. So the idea is you want to get the easy yes first so that you can get the hard yes later. This small shift alone can dramatically increase your opt-in rates. By the way, I'm really just scratching the surface here with this first step of the pop-up. If you want to see a full breakdown of every step of the pop-up and the nuances of all that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'll be putting together a video about that very soon that you can check out and use for your own benefit. With that said, the next element that makes a huge difference in opt-in rates is the microcopy you're using on your pop-up. Now, it's really not that complicated, but brands do overcomplicate it, or they're just not being very intentional with it. When it comes to your copy, your offer is going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So if you're offering 15% or 20% or whatever it is, that's what you really want to be emphasizing in your copy. And so when it comes to a pop-up, you're mostly working with headlines and call to actions. There isn't a whole lot of body copy, maybe a little subhead here and there, but really it's headlines and call to actions. And in your headlines and call to actions, one of my biggest suggestions is to make sure that the offer is prominent in all your headlines and all your call to actions, obviously until the thank you page anyways, but you just want to remind the person why they're filling out the form at every second of the experience. So if the first step is you're asking them a question, like in the examples I showed you before, you really want to just make sure that the 15% is in the headline. And then when they are filling out the email address at that step, you want to make sure 15% is in the headline there too, and in the call to action. And if you have SMS, so on and so forth. So that's really big. That again, you just want to remind them why they're doing it, so they're never forgetting why they're signing up. You always make that front and center as a reminder to them. Now, if you're collecting SMS, obviously you have to include some kind of disclaimer language just to keep yourself out of trouble. That is going to be quite a lot of copy, but you're going to put that in like a very small size font. Most people don't read it, but you just got to have it there just to keep yourself safe and make sure that that's linked to your privacy policy and your terms and conditions. But other than that, you're not really using a whole lot of copy. It just doesn't make sense. People are not going to read. You want to keep it super simple. So headlines, call to actions, really, that's what you're going to be using most of the time. And it makes sense, right? If there's more copy, people have to read more. They're not going to want to do that. So they're just going to bounce and your opt-in rates are going to suffer. Now, something that's really overlooked a lot, and again, people are just not really intentional with, is the exit text. And what I mean by exit text is right underneath your call to action, you should always have a little bit of text that gives people the option to leave your form. Just for the record, you don't want to make it hard for people to exit your form. That just infuriates people even more, and it makes them want to. It's like a reverse psychology thing. If you hide the X or you don't make an easy exit for people, people just get more anxious and they want to actually exit your pop-up. So you do actually want to create conditions for people to leave your pop-up if they ever want to. That being said, underneath your call to actions, you should always have a little piece of text that gives people the option to get out of your form. Now, people write all kinds of little things here thinking it's not important, but it actually is. It does actually inform the person's psychology, what you say in this little piece of text. So one of the biggest mistakes I see is people saying things like maybe later. Terrible thing to write, because what that does is it kills the scarcity of your offer. If people feel like they can get your discount or offer or whatever it is your pop-up is giving them, what's the incentive for them to fill out the form right then and there, right? You don't want to use language like that. The other kind of language I see that just really doesn't work is when they try to guilt the person for not filling out their form. So they'll write something like, no thanks, I'll pay full price if it's a discount, right? They'll write something like that. Again, really terrible, because all that does is just, it kind of antagonizes the person and just makes them feel, they can feel like you're kind of manipulating them. So all it does is just like has the like reverse effect where it doesn't like get them to fill out your form, it actually gets them to bounce. So I wouldn't use that either. The language that works the best is just saying no thanks. Because there's like a finality to it. If somebody sees your offer and then they see no thanks, what it does in their head is says, oh, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to get this. So you know what? Let me just fill out the form. Let me just give them my email address so that you can get the discount. Again, it's really subtle, but these little choices can have a significant impact on your opt-in rate. So it is worth being intentional and, just thinking through like the psychology of what your words may be conveying in somebody's head, right? So what about design and timing, right? We haven't really talked about that yet. I'll be honest, that stuff is important, but relative to figuring out your offer, how you present your first step, the microcopy, it's really not as significant. Like those are really the biggest levers you should be focusing on. Design and timing, they're more so secondary levers. That being said, if you're gonna tamper with this stuff, here's what you should do. So as far as the aesthetic of your pop-up, like, what kind of fonts you should use, what kind of colors, like a lot of that is really informed by how your website looks. So you want your pop-up to really just match your website in terms of the aesthetic. It has to look like it's a part of your website. There isn't a lot to overthink there. Obviously, headlines should be big, right? If you have an offer that you want people to see, if it's 15%, that should be really, real big. Your call to actions should be colorful and bright and separate from all the other elements. These things you're probably already doing on your website. The rules basically apply the same here in your pop-up. You do generally want to include a logo of your brand to just keep the pop-up branded. This is especially important on mobile where it's going to take up the full screen. So having a logo of your brand there, I think, is really important. So again, from a design point of view, it's not going to do a lot for your conversions, but it is important a little bit. And if you're going to do it right, that's how you should do it. Now, speaking of logo, let's talk about imagery a little bit. Now, again, mobile is really small in terms of the real estate. So again, you're just going to have mostly space for copy and call to actions, right? But the desktop is different. You got a way bigger screen, so you can get a little more visual. I'll be honest, visuals, they're kind of arbitrary. People are really going to be gravitating again towards your offer and how easy it is to get that offer by the sort of steps you present. So visually, I don't think there's a lot of significance there, but in terms of like how you present the pop-up on a desktop layout, you do want to do a full page takeover just so it's, you know, front and center, and that's where all of their attention is going. So that's really important from a design standpoint. Now, as far as like timing your pop-up, that's also a little bit important. You obviously don't want to show up too soon because that gets a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. Somebody just got on your website and they're being hit with a pop-up right away. They're just gonna like, the bounce rate's gonna be high and your opt-in rates are gonna be terrible. That being said, you also don't want to show your pop-up too late because somebody might just spend a little bit of time just looking at the hero section of your website and they might bounce, and you didn't show your pop-up on time and you missed out on an opportunity to turn that person into a subscriber. So really, when it comes to timing, it's really just about not showing up too soon and also not showing up too late. General rule of thumb, 8 seconds works really great as a starting point. I'm not saying that that's a universally, that's going to work all the time in terms of getting you the most high opt-in rates, but from what I've tested, that just kind of works. So you should run that as a starting point. And obviously you can like do tests to see if 12 seconds works better versus 8 seconds, that kind of thing. What's also really important is scroll depth. So you want to make sure you're timing your pop-up to show up within 8 seconds, but also based on how much scrolling somebody does when they're on your website. So again, rule of thumb, 35% works really great here. You can test 45, 55, but honestly, 35 has just kind of been like the sweet spot for most brands I've worked with. So I would just try that as a starting point if I were you. Now, you also want to make sure you're filtering your pop-up so you're not just necessarily showing it to anyone that comes on your website. One thing you probably want to filter people based on is geography. You know, if you have a business that's in the US and that's really where you sell and ship, you probably don't want, you know, traffic from Canada or Germany, you know, coming on your site and then filling out your pop-up, and now they're on your list and you can't really do much with them, right? So filtering based on geography is really important. You also obviously don't want people who are already on your Klaviyo list to be seeing your pop-up. They're already there. So make sure you can check that option off too when you're setting up your pop-up. Also, really important, you don't want your pop-up showing up during the checkout page or somebody filling out a landing page you've got somewhere on your website. So you can filter out your pop-ups based on pages on your site. So really important to take out the checkout page or any sort of cart-based page. If you have any landing pages where there's already a form, you obviously don't want the pop-up showing up there. So also really important to make sure you have that filtered out when setting up your pop-up. Now, when it comes to A/B testing your pop-up, there's all kinds of variables you could test for, but honestly, you should focus on the big levers that we've discussed, which is the offer, how you're going to present that offer as a first step, and the copy you're using to guide the person from step to step. You should really focus on that first and not so much some of the other stuff that I often see brands and agencies wasting time on. You know, things like timing delays, 8 seconds versus 10 seconds, or 35% scroll depth versus 50% scroll depth, or, you know, if my call to action should have rounded corners versus 90-degree corners, should my headlines have 16, like on mobile, should it be 16 size font versus 20 size font? It's not like, these things are fine to test for, but like if you haven't figured out and optimized the bigger levers, you shouldn't be wasting your time on this little stuff. These little things can have little impact on your conversion rate, but really the most impact is going to come from those bigger levers. So that's where you should be focusing on in terms of your A/B testing, because that's really what's going to drive your opt-in rates. So just a little word of caution. I see brands and agencies going down this rabbit hole sometimes, and I don't want you necessarily making that mistake. With that being said, if today's video helped you better understand how to optimize your pop-ups so you're getting more email signups, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll be covering more strategies and breakdowns inside Klaviyo for Shopify brands who are looking to not only boost their email marketing performance, but their conversions as well. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you, and I will catch you on the next video. Take care for now. Bye.